CES was once a relatively normal tech show. Sure, the gadgets were expensive and the concepts looked a little bit bizarre from time to time, but generally speaking, it was pretty consumer friendly, and at the very least, you could get an idea of some sound concepts that were coming down the pipeline in years to come. The show took place in Las Vegas last week, and it appears to have fully transitioned into a world of batty nonsense. The way it works typically is vendors who are displaying things have what they are displaying categorized by type. And as you would expect right now, this year, it was mostly AI junk. I could and might make a video on AI, having used GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT pretty extensively and found them to be smoke and mirrors for the most part. However, in terms of CES, I'm not really that interested in most of that. It was all variations of what if Object X had AI? You know, what if your cheese grater had AI? What if a bookmark had AI? What if Mario was a hideous shade of himself with a robot voice that makes even Chris Pratt sound like a good choice?
If you want to eat healthy, consider incorporating a variety of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins, and healthy fats into your diet. Some nutritious soap.
I hope whatever company is responsible for that monstrosity have a militia on hand to fend off the army of Nintendo lawyers heading their way. Ultimately, this stuff is all ChatGPT under the hood, so it has the same issues, and given how easy it seems to be to poison this AI, possibly the same short lifespan. So another frequent returner to the show are gadgets that change how you interact with things. A common trend these days is some sort of sensor or augmented reality. We're talking your sort of sci-fi fun-sounding gadgets, your standard wavy hand or shout at something until it understands you tech. They're often things that look really swish in a sci-fi movie, but in reality nobody wants to use a Nintendo Power Glove to control a PC when a mouse and keyboard is so much more versatile. I mean, you probably have something in your house that you can yell at right now, not your partner, like a remote control or something. Do you, or do you just use the buttons because it's quicker and easier? I know which I do. Or maybe you have an Alexa in the corner just gathering dust, like everybody else I know. So these swish, wavy hand, AR, yelly categories are another batty area of the show. So that means we have to move on to something else that I largely ignore. Concept cars. I love Forza, but in reality, I drive a little Toyota. I'm not really interested in and can't afford to own a fancy car. I've always kind of thought of these concept cars as an outlet for frustrated car designers. Normal cars have a standard shape. It's a shape that's been honed over decades. It's designed for safety, efficiency, and creating a uniformly recognized standard. Meaning when I did a track day, stepping out of my Yaris and into a Ferrari, it wasn't completely alien to me. If you try and break that well-known structure for a car, then you're just embarrassing yourself and making something stupid and probably unsafe, Elon.
Oh my fucking god.
So concept cars are when designers get a holiday from the normal. They get to flex their weird, wild imagination, the cars they probably doodled when they were thinking of becoming a car designer in the first place. And I've got to say, they've been a little bit muted this year. A few of them actually look like cars. But there was still room for battiness, like this car that was driven on stage by someone using a games console controller. I cannot wait for gamepad-controlled cars to completely redefine what the word drifting means. And that's not the only odd thing with this car. It has an AR display, so not only are regular road users going to have to deal with cars that drift, but with drivers distracted by trying to catch a Pikachu. Or worse, yelling at their car, because, as you would expect, Microsoft have got involved and this is a vessel for AI, a full conversational voice-activated AI. We all know this is nonsense. In no sane world are we going to see legal road cars where the driver can and is allowed to control it with a games console pad with AR games on the go. Just like we won't see the old pipe dream of personalized flying cars, which has reared its ugly head again, as it tends to do. Good luck getting that off the ground. quite literally with the logistical challenges. On the positive side, hydrogen fuel seems to be back in a big way, and it's going to be interesting to see if some of the challenges have been overcome, because I've always preferred the idea of hydrogen fuel as a replacement for fossil fuels over electric cars. So the final big category on the table, the thing I actually do care about, which in the history of CES has been the most likely to become a scalable consumer good, are the gadgets. Simple, plausible, actual gadgets that have a purpose. So let's take a look at some of this year's gadgets that aren't just a housing for ChatGPT. Though it is worth pointing out, most of them have an AI component, because it was legitimately difficult to find things that don't. If you ever wanted to smoke meats, but you don't have outside space, and simply buying pre-smoked meats is not good enough for you, well, let me introduce you to the indoor smoker. For the low price of $1,000, you can now devote the time, the energy, and the resources required to smoke a small amount of meat with no carbon monoxide poisoning, absolutely guaranteed. I hope. Look, I actually love smoked meats, but as someone who lives in an apartment-type property with no outdoor space, I can tell you two things the average person like me does not have a lot of: money and space. A single-use gadget that costs more than my monthly mortgage and takes up a third of my kitchen, it's not going to happen. It's a no-go. The people in the best position to get something like this, and who would even probably want something like this, almost certainly have the space and the money for a proper barbecue. Here's another easy-breezy, fun kitchen gadget. Oh my god, it's enormous. For it to be that big, surely it's got to be everything, right? Popcorn maker, grill, oven,
microwave,
blender. Nope. It's a steak toaster. I'm sure we've all looked at our regular toaster at least once and thought, I wish it was about 5 times bigger and toasted steaks. I'm being a little facetious. It's a horizontal grill with, of course, as you've guessed, AI. But most of the marketing and press around this is about its ability to cook the perfect steak extremely quickly. So I guess my cast iron skillet is utterly redundant. Now, if you don't already know how much this costs, I want you to get a number in your head that you think an AI toaster is worth. Don't be ridiculous just because you know that I'm building up to a silly price. Get a realistic idea of what you would expect to pay for an oversized AI toaster. Got a number? Good. $3,500.
What?
For that price, it's got me wondering if I can play Cyberpunk on it. After that, I don't know about you, but I need a drink. You know the bit where you measure your drinks into a shaker, mix them, and then pour it into a glass? How would you like to pay $600 for that? Introducing the Barsys 360 Cocktail Robot. This is where this year's gadgets start to test my patience. It's considered one of the most intriguing kitchen gadgets at the show, but as best I can tell, it literally just lets you pour liquids into a tray and then pick a cocktail from a list, and it will measure them and mix them and then pour them into the glass for you. The only thing I can find here that actually seems useful, and this is an assumption, is if you have 3 drinks that you're not sure what you can do with them, you can input them in the app and it will pinpoint a curated list of cocktails that you could make from that. But I'm sure as an app, that could be released separately for like $2. In fact, it may even already exist. I have no idea, I've never looked, because I just wing it and hope it tastes good. And the other thing that bugs me about this particular device is it's an enclosed system with sugary liquids. It's going to be a nightmare to look after. So the kitchen gadgets are a bust. They are too expensive and too impractical. Which leaves basically one area that has been a staple of CES for years: televisions. But here's the problem. TV innovations in the last few years have highlighted something to me. We may have peaked technologically on what is reasonably practical to do with TVs. Hit a sort of technological singularity with TVs, where everything else is lagging behind. I mean, air-based channels aren't broadcasting at 4K, and the few streaming channels that offer 4K aren't close to 8K. Plus, often when something says it's 4K, what it means is 4K kinda. It's 4K with a caveat. The limitations in bandwidth, equipment, and the technological advances in recording equipment mean there's really no point in iterating on picture quality now. But because late-stage capitalism really doesn't have any room for, hey, we made the best TV that people need right now. That's it. Job done. Television companies keep having to come up with weird iterations. They keep having to progress, and they are progressively becoming more insane. Remember curved TVs and 3D TVs? They actually made it into regular people's homes for a reasonable price. Well, last year's CES had a £200,000 foldable TV. That is quite the big leap in nonsense. This year has been no exception for utterly useless TVs that are 1,000 times more expensive and pointless than what you already have. You ever found yourself wondering, what are the spiders up to behind my TV? Well, introducing the new transparent TV. For the compromise of a terrible picture quality, you can now see all of the cobwebs and dust building up in the space between the back of your TV and the wall. What an outstandingly useful idea, right? Apparently you can turn it opaque, but there's a lack of information about that mode, largely because it would seem from the limited information I can find that the image quality is, as you would expect, heavily compromised by the TV's original purpose. As a serial movie watcher, a substandard screen at an unknown but almost certainly outrageous price does not sound ideal. In case you didn't know, CES stands for Consumer Electronics Show. But in reality, in the world we live in, these excruciatingly expensive gadgets have two markets that I can think of. Number one, insanely rich people. Someone in Dubai who has gotten wealthy off the back of human rights violations could well buy a $3,500 toaster, and they would use it less often than they post pictures of it on Instagram. But no normal sane consumer is going to buy that. And number two, but much more importantly, content creators, which is why CES is not a consumer tech show anymore. The astute among you may have noticed that I haven't mentioned brand names, because CES is now a brand marketing show. News sites, YouTubers, influencers, tech bloggers, and alike will make content about these things and how insane they are, getting the names of the brands into the public consciousness in this moment. Hell, some Zoomer is probably doing a TikTok dance in front of a picture of that cocktail maker right now. So the more absurd and niche the idea, the better. CES has become a sort of tech bait for content creators to then create clickbait, which is why, given the history of CES changing its name, I would like to petition for its name to be changed from Consumer Electronics Show to Creator Electronics Show. And yes, I am acutely aware that I've fallen into the exact same trap by making this, but to that I invoke the right of nuh-uh. So thanks for watching, and please do consider all of the likey subscribey nonsense. It is greatly appreciated.